Welcome into Unpaid Interns. I'm Griffin Epstein. Happy Monday morning, and it is a very happy Monday morning for all the Indiana football fans after Indiana football for the first time in 24 games, dating all the way back to 1988, defeated Michigan, finally ending the longest drought in college football between two teams. Michigan had won 24 straight games. It is no more after Indiana really beat down the Wolverines on Saturday. And we have a great guest to talk all about it. Dylan Wallace joins me this morning, reporter on Indiana football from Sports Illustrated Indiana. Dylan, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's really nice weather in Bloomington for November 9th, so that's been nice, man. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, the weather. I'm originally from California, so people have been joking. I brought the weather with me. It's actually been warmer here than it has in California, so it's been a very enjoyable last couple of days, and temperatures all the way in the 70s. Anyways, let's talk a little bit of Indiana football. I mean, you've covered the team the last couple of years. Did you see what was coming on Saturday? Because very few people in the country, I mean, certainly expected that. Michigan was favored by 3 points in that game.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because kind of being around the program the last few years, you can kind of see this kind of building up. I don't know if it's you could predict that they would have been 3-0, Michigan and Penn State, for the first time ever. But you could sort of just see, I guess, the belief from them, and kind of the improvement that they've had on the field really increasing over the last few years. Even last year, I think back to the Michigan State game was one of a really like turning point for me because they lost the game, but they had Michael Penix. He played really well, and they should have won the game. And it was sort of the typical loss that any football usually has. Can't hold on to a late lead, but a lot of people I think were just like, oh, same old IU football. But kind of being there, it felt different. It felt like this happened, but it didn't feel like it was the same Indiana football. You could tell that they knew they should have won the game. They felt like they should have won the game. They felt like they were the better team, and they were just determined to not let those things happen again. And it did happen again in the Gator Bowl. But I mean, coming into this year, I mean, those have been emphasis that they've had is just finish games. And you look at the Penn State game. It looked like that was going to be kind of the same old thing too, but they were able to finish that. And I'm really, I think it was a really good thing that they sort of made a statement against Michigan the way they did, just because a lot of people look at that Penn State game and they're kind of like, should the reach have counted or not, and is the Shazzer been a win or not? But you look at this game, 38-21. I mean, there's no disputing that at all. And I think you needed a win like that against a power, top program in the Big Ten like Michigan. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I saw this coming exactly, but you definitely saw the last few years just the confidence and the roots being planted and everything for this program to kind of get to where it is and what it's doing right now.
Just in terms of the rivalry, and 24 straight games is a ridiculous long period of time for two teams that almost play every year to dominate. What did it just mean for the program to finally beat a team that they could not beat?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, a lot. When you talk to people, a lot of people say, it's not about Michigan, it's about what Indiana did, and Tom Allen will say that too. But I think kind of below the surface, like it was a big thing to get off their backs is to beat Michigan. You haven't beaten them since 1987, 24 years. I mean, that's a long time, 24 straight times to lose to a team. And I remember I was at the game in 2017 in Bloomington where the game went to overtime. There was a real good shot that they could have won that game. And it felt like they were going to, but they couldn't pull it out. And, Tom Allen even brought that up after the game on Saturday. And he was like, I remember that vividly. I thought we were going to get them. He's like, and I kept telling myself, one day we're going to get these guys. So it was definitely a big thing for the program. And, it's huge. I mean, they just keep knocking off milestone after milestone this season, in terms of AP rankings, coach poll rankings, beating Penn State, beating Michigan now. I mean, they just keep making history for themselves, and it's gonna be an exciting season. I think that there's more to be made for them, but this Michigan win was absolutely huge, and it's kind of unfortunate, sort of how it's perceived nationally because a lot of attention is just on Michigan failing again, Jim Harbaugh's job. Is this team even good? It's not about what kind of Indiana did. It's more about what Michigan didn't do, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, especially for these guys. But I think they're happy with it, and I think it's just, as you mentioned, it's just big for the program to finally get this win against Michigan, and as I said earlier, just do it in a big kind of statement way.
Part of the argument that I've seen a little bit nationally on Indiana, and they are obviously ranked 10 in the country, but is that, they beat Penn State. Now Penn State looks like they're falling apart. They're 0-3 after getting blown out by Maryland over the weekend. And Michigan, they don't look very good either. They're now out of the top 25. Is a little bit of that reasonable maybe to say maybe Indiana is obviously much improved, but maybe not at the level that people think they are, just because Michigan and Penn State are very much down this year?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. I think if I know you're also kind of around the program as well this year. So I think when you're not really around it, you're not talking to them, you're not seeing them play every time, and you just kind of see the results and everything that happens after that. I think it's really easy to kind of make assumptions like that. It reminds me of in 2016, Indiana beat Michigan State at home here. It was like a last-second field goal. Michigan State was ranked and they were ranked in the top 25. I think it was 23 or something like that. Fans rushed the field. It was a huge deal. It seemed like a pretty breakthrough win, and then Michigan State won like 2 games all year. So it was just like, wow, at the time, like that was really early in the season. It felt like it meant something. Michigan State ended up being really bad. You're kind of seeing that with Penn State right now. I think a lot of Indiana fans, after they beat Penn State, were hoping, they would at least maybe lose to Ohio State and then win out the rest of the season. So it looked like a little bit of a better victory. But yeah, Penn State's struggling right now. You're going to have to see what's going to happen with Michigan. If they keep struggling, might taint the victory. But I mean, I think it's a fair argument for people to sort of say that just based on what Penn State and Michigan have done. But I think, like you and I kind of have realized just how well that they're playing, what they're doing, their mindset. I mean, it's tough to, for people like us to sort of look at that and think they're not as good as what they are. I mean, I think it's going to be a huge test coming up in the next few weeks. I'm sure we might get to that, but yeah, I think it's a fair argument for sure. But I personally think that this team is kind of where they are in the ranking. I mean, I think they deserve to be in the top 10 after what they've done, and I just think that from what they've been able to do and how they kind of carry themselves and their mindsets throughout this season. They believe they are where they should be, and no matter what kind of Penn State and Michigan do the rest of the season, they deserve kind of where they are right now.
One big difference for Indiana on Saturday, and was certainly a big reason that they were in control the whole game, was their offense. Finally played a complete game, and they hadn't done that against Penn State or Rutgers. What was the difference for Indiana offensively? Probably playing the best offensive game that they've had in the Tom Allen era.
Yeah, that was a big key for them. I mean, because you hit it on the head. You look at the first 2 games. They struggled pretty hard, at least out of the gates, against Penn State and Rutgers to get things going offensively. It's really funny because I mean, coming into this season in the offseason, all the hype was around the offense, everything they were bringing back, and they just have not kind of lived up to the expectations so far. Except you look at this past Saturday, they were clicking on all cylinders, and it was huge. It was a big emphasis for them to start fast and get out of the gates against Michigan. That's exactly what they did. I think they saw what Michigan State did to Michigan a week prior. Just taking advantage of that man defense and just throwing kind of the deep balls. And Ty Freifogel, he was a recipient in front of some of those balls, and he said after the game, like, you just got to throw it up and you got to make plays. There's no formula to it. Like, that's how you beat man. And I think that's what Indiana tried to do. They tried to attack the man. And, Michael Penix was doing his best Aaron Rodgers impression, drawing them off sides. And as soon as he sees that flag, he throws it deep, and he connected on like 2 of them, which is impressive to do. Their offense was rolling. I mean, their run game isn't the best, but they were able to do it enough to kind of keep Michigan, honest, keep them respecting the run game. And I think as the game kind of went on, Stevie Scott is a big, strong guy. He was able to kind of flourish there and wear him down even more at the end. So I just think they were firing on all cylinders, and it's kind of the offense that a lot of people expected to see from Indiana this season. So if they can keep that up, that's going to be really good for them, because I mean, this offense is they keep saying, they keep improving every week, and if they can keep executing how they sort of did on Saturday, it's going to be a big thing for them, especially if the defense keeps playing how they've been playing.
It was a career day for Michael Penix as well. He threw for a career high in terms of yardage, over 400 yards through the air. And I mean, he really looked great the whole game. I guess the question is now, can he get better, and can he do this consistently? Because I mean, man, the way he looked, you could you could have his name in the conversation to go to New York for Heisman Trophy if he could do this week in and week out, you feel like.
Yeah, I remember, really early, I guess last season, just sort of the performances he was having. The Michigan State game, I think he completed something like 19 or 20 consecutive passes in a row. And a lot of people kind of around that time were sort of like Michael Penix for Heisman. Maybe a lot of it's jokes, maybe a lot of it's serious. I don't know, but I mean, I think he's definitely talented enough. I mean, I see like Pro Football Focus is saying he's a top 10 quarterback in college football. A lot of people are sort of buying into the Michael Penix hype, and rightfully so. I think he will. I mean, I think he's only going to keep getting better. Just the weapons that he has, the accuracy he has. As long as as long as the receivers don't keep dropping the ball because he throws it so hard. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an exciting year for him. I don't know if he'll get into the Heisman conversation. I mean, it'll be interesting. Maybe the first 2 weeks might have hurt him, but I mean, if he keeps this up, he keeps doing what he did against Michigan, and he does it every single game the rest of the season. You might be able to hear his name be brought up, which would be a really exciting thing for Indiana football. I don't know the last time they've had anyone maybe in the conversation. I'm not sure, but it'd definitely be cool to see that. But I think he definitely has the talent to keep getting better. I think he has the mindset that what he did Saturday isn't good enough, and he wants to keep getting better and better, which I think is a good thing. That's fits into the whole entire team. Like they've done all this, but I mean, Tom Allen and all their coaches aren't going to let them be satisfied by anything they've done so far, which I think is the more exciting part about it if you're an Indiana fan.
Yeah, the only name that I can ever think of that was really ever in the high. I mean, Antoine Randall a little bit in the Heisman conversation, but you have to go back to Anthony Thompson for the last name. I think the only name Indiana's ever sent to New York City to go to that ceremony, and I think that was during the Bill Mallory era, 89 or 90, and he finished second to Andre Ward. One storyline that was really big, I think that especially had longtime Indiana football fans just kind of in shock, was in the trenches. Indiana on both sides of the football really dominated. What surprised me the most was the offensive line, which hadn't been very good so far this season for Indiana, going up probably against some of the best defensive ends, Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson in football. And the offensive line was dominant. And on the other side of the football, the defensive line, they out physicaled Michigan offensively. Talent wise, Indiana's always been at a deficit there, and yet they look like the more talented team on Saturday. How has that transformation occurred for Indiana when they can't recruit those big boys that Michigan has?
Yeah, I mean that was the biggest thing. One of the biggest things on Saturday. I remember the O line was pretty good last season, and so far this season, I mean they had struggled really really bad. Harry Cryer's moved to center. They have Matt Bedford and Caleb Jones kind of switching tackle spots, and I just think it was they were just kind of adjusting maybe in the first two games, kind of playing together. I remember in Penn State, one of the second to last possession in the regulation, Michael Penix just got blown up like three straight plays, and it was just like, wow, this whole line is playing not really good. And they played really well on Saturday, and I think Michael Penix got the game ball, and I mean, he got it. He's like, don't want to be cheesy or anything, but I'm going to give this to my old line. They really had, and that's what they did. They protected him really well, and he was able to get. That's why he got near 400, 500 passing yards that game, is because of the protection he was able to get. And then as far as the D line, I mean, man, I've never, since I've watched Indiana football, like them getting pressure on the quarterback has never been anything that they've been able to do well at all. And coming into this season, kind of the talent up front has been something that they've talked about a lot. And I don't know if we necessarily saw it against Penn State, but against Rutgers, you saw it a lot more. Especially they were dialing up a lot of different kinds of blitzes, giving them a lot of different looks. Even use the secondary to bring blitzes, which is really good because I mean those guys are fast and athletic and smart. And then they did that again against Michigan. Yeah, man. I mean, it was really impressive what they were able to do. You have secondary that can cover the passing game, and if you can get pressure on that quarterback, man, I mean, it's a game changer. And for Joe Milton, I mean, an emphasis was not letting him run the ball, and they did a really good job of containing him in the pocket, getting pressure on him, forcing bad throws, forcing him out. I mean, it was just a really really impressive job that I was super I don't know if I was shocked by it, but I think, we are so used to not seeing that happen for Indiana football that, when they were able to do that and play so well on the defensive line, it was just a really promising thing. And right now, I mean, this defense has impressed me more than anything at all three levels. I mean, the linebacking group is really solid as well. And the secondary I think is incredible. Playing awesome right now. But yeah, I mean that D line I think was the biggest question mark is can they finally get pressure on the quarterback? Can they do the run fit well, stop the run game? And they've been able to do that so far. So I mean the defense has been the most impressive thing I think this season for me at least.
Yeah, the defense has been so interesting too, because I think we heard in the offseason, they said this is the year we're going to take the next step. And I don't know. I think as the Indiana media, we didn't really believe them because we've never seen the Indiana defense play the next step. I mean, under Kevin Wilson, the defense was a laughing stock. Tom Allen made it maybe respectable, but certainly not a strength of this team. The only answer I've heard that seems reputable is just more experience to why this defense has gotten so much better. Do you have any other rationale on why the defense has gone from a pretty mediocre defense to one of the best defenses now in Big Ten college football?
Yeah, I think experience is probably the biggest thing, just because I mean most of these guys were here last season. I mean 9 starters in the defensive end are all back, and it's interesting because it's interesting how experience works out. Because if you didn't play particularly well maybe last season, it's sort of the same group, and you bring them back a year later. Like, do you expect them to be better? Do you expect them to do the same? I mean, but I just think, and especially with the weird off season, not being together for a while and all of that was going on. I mean, it's been impressive how they've kind of come together and played this well. I think they improved definitely last season as time went on. I know in the Gator Bowl is a big thing coaches will bring up to say this defense did really well because they were able to make big stops when they needed to. I know Indiana blew the lead and everything, but I think they were really pleased with sort of how the defense played in that game. I think that confidence sort of carried over. I think that the guys on defense are really kind of hungry, and they have minds that they think that they're the best. I mean, Tywone Mullen's one of the most confident dudes I've ever talked to. Reese Taylor the last few games we've talked to Reese Taylor, I mean, he just said on Saturday he thinks, we can be the number one team in the country. And, it's not a matter of if that's true or not. It's a matter of the fact that they actually believe it. And I think that's the biggest thing for them is that they believe that they can be the best team. And that's huge. And that's everything. But yeah, I mean, the defense has been shockingly really good. Just because I don't know. I mean, one of the things is that when you kind of measure how good a defense is playing, I think you look less at points just because how good offenses are in today's game. Like they gave up. I guess I don't. They gave up. They would get up a decent amount of points, but still, just the plays they made, the turnovers they created, has just been so huge. And I mean, people have been talking about that might be the best defense that they've seen from an Indiana football team. And I think it does probably just come down to experience. I think Kane Womack has just gotten better at his job at being the defensive coordinator. And that's just been the biggest thing for them because it's not like they brought in anybody particularly new. These are all the same guys that were here last year. And I think just the continuity of playing together, bringing over the chemistry from a season ago, getting a whole season under your belt and now coming into this year. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing for them, and it's definitely showing.
One thing that's been also, I think, very different, we mentioned the trenches somewhere that Indiana has really struggled with in the past. And the other thing is just taking advantage of opportunities and playing smart football, not something that is synonymous with Indiana football. And on Saturday, we saw all 3 times Michigan scored a touchdown, Indiana's offense would respond, go down the field and get a score. And late in the game, the defense came up with multiple turnovers. The defense has now forced 8 turnovers, 7 interceptions on the season. What has flipped the switch for Indiana from going from a team the last couple years under Tom Allen has really crumpled under pressure and been unable to deliver in those big moments to anytime there's a big moment, such as breaking a 24-game losing streak? I mean, they always looked poised and just looked to control the whole game, I thought, against the Wolverines.
Yeah, they definitely did. And it sort of just comes down to, these guys have been through it last season, Michigan State, last season in the Gator Bowl against Tennessee. And I think once you kind of go through it, you get a better understanding of what you need to do to not let it happen again. And I think that was a big thing. We've seen it happen year after year with all the kind of Indiana football teams. But last season with this particular group, maybe it was a good thing they kind of didn't finish some of these games, and they still had an historic season and won 8 games. And you come into this season and now they kind of realize what they want to do to be able to finish these games. And that's been the biggest thing. Tom Allen said, finish games. And, that's kind of what they've been able to do. And I think it might be more of a mindset thing, confidence in them that they can execute against these teams and, not be afraid of a ranking next to a team's name or a stat, associated with the past with their program, and just be able to just take it to these teams and finish them. And that's been one of the bigger things. I mean, you're right. I mean, man, that offense, I mean, against Rutgers, they sort of let them hang around a little bit, and Tom Allen wasn't pleased with that. Against Michigan, once Michigan makes it a two-score game, I think, Indiana just goes down and scores and just, puts the foot down on their throat. And then even when the defense comes up with the stop, they get the ball back. I think after the Devon Matthews pick, they get the ball back. There's maybe a little over 3 minutes to go, and you just run out the whole entire clock. You don't even go 3 and out. You don't even punt it away. You just take everything to them, and you just make sure they don't get another chance. And that's just been everything for them. I think that's this statement win against Michigan was the biggest and best thing they've done this season. Because if you squeak out another victory, people can still ask questions. But from this win, 38-21, I mean, there's no questions about that, just how well they were able to play on both ends of the ball, and kind of the mindset that they were able to use just to shut these teams down, not let them get back into the game and close them out. Like, that's something that Indiana football has needed to do for a long time. And I think now they have a team that's capable of executing, believing they can do it, and, actually doing it, which was very evident on Saturday.
One question that honestly, I was just thinking this morning that came to my mind. I was thinking about Minnesota, and last season, the Golden Gophers had a breakthrough season under PJ Fleck, and a program not as bad historically as Indiana, but not a program that had a lot of recent success in the last 20, 30 years, had a breakout season, beat Penn State, won 11 games, went to a big-time Florida bowl game. And this year, they've kind of regressed after losing pieces. And, obviously this is something we can talk about more, in January and February when the season's done. How is this season going to be a blip, I guess, is what I'm saying, kind of what we're seeing from Minnesota, who's now 1-2 and kind of looks like the same old Golden Gophers football? Or is this something Indiana can maintain long-term, beating Penn State, beating Michigan, and in a normal season, winning 9-10 games a year and being at the top of the Big Ten?
Yeah, it's something they can sustain. I mean, you look at last year, they won 8 games, and then coming into this season, that was a big question coming in this year. What are they going to be able to do, especially with the modified schedule? I mean, if you look at their schedule, I mean, man, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, you're playing 8 games and you get an extra 9th one. I mean, when you look at that schedule, I mean, a lot of people were like, man, what if they go 4-4? Like, is that going to be disappointing? Is it not? Like, what are people going to think about this team if they, win the games supposed to, but still struggle against other teams? That was a big thing, for me and other people kind of looking at this season was like, could they improve on what they did last year? Was last year a blip? Are they going to be able to win the big games? And that's exactly what they've done this season. They've kind of proved that, it doesn't matter who's on the schedule. They're competing at a high level, beating teams that they normally don't. And I think going forward, especially next season specifically, just because of how young they are, how all the guys are going to still have. Penix will be there. Most of the defense is still going to be there. A lot of the offensive players are still going to be there. And just a carryover from this season to next season, I think will be huge. I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see how they handle road environments with crowds. If there's crowds next year, if you go to Penn State, it's a lot different, which they will be next season. Will be a lot different than playing in Beaver Stadium with no fans. But it'll just be really interesting to see. I think it is kind of a sustained success thing for them, especially this team they have right now, because of what they're doing right now. And they know they can beat these teams. I mean, and going into next season, I don't think that's going to change. I think Tom Allen's only going to keep growing confidence. He's recruiting really well still. He's bringing a lot of players who could help the program too. So I mean, I think it's an exciting time to be an Indiana football fan. And, I think it's going to be more than just this year, which I think is a really good thing for them. At least in my opinion, I think they'll be able to sort of keep going into the next few years as a program that can be competing maybe for a Big Ten title or be for the top of the Big Ten East at least.
I might have jumped a little ahead there, looking at future seasons. So let's look at the rest of this season now. Obviously, there's a lot of anticipation. You're 3-0. You're in the top 10 for the first time since 1969. They have Michigan State coming up this week, and then Ohio State, and obviously the undefeated back-to-back-to-back Big Ten champions. What can Indiana do this rest of the season? And I guess the question everyone has: can they beat Ohio State?
That's the biggest thing, and that's like the sort of a concern right now in terms of the scheduling, because I think they're 3-0 right now, and everyone really wants to play Ohio State, but you got to go play Michigan State first. And the intriguing matchup of 4-0 top 10 Indiana going to 4-0 top 10 Ohio State in 2 weeks is just huge. I mean, that'll be an incredible game, an incredible game to cover, and I think that's what a lot of people want to see. But you got to go take care of Michigan State. This is a Michigan State team that's kind of been up and down this year. They struggled against Rutgers, then they beat Michigan, and then they just lose. Like they're down 35-0 at one point to Iowa. It's been a weird season for them. I think they're a tough opponent. I think they can do things to kind of cause trouble for Indiana, but Indiana should win this game, and you just hope that they don't look past this game, because Ohio State's right around the corner, man, and you can get really distracted on that. If it kind of comes to your mind, but I think the coaching staff it does a pretty good job of kind of keeping these guys focused. I think they're kind of focused too, and I think it kind of means a lot if they can go to Ohio State 4-0. Being in the top 10, I think that game will be super exciting. Can they beat Ohio State? I don't know, man. Ohio State's really good, as they always usually are. I think Indiana can be pretty competitive, though. I don't know if they necessarily beat them, but I think that they can play competitive with them, which I think is big. I mean, last year they lost 52-10, which is not good. And Michael Penix hasn't played a game against Ohio State yet, and that was a big thing for Penn State and Michigan. He hadn't played a full game against those guys either, and now he has, and now he's beating them both. So I think it's sort of an exciting thing, and just sort of the belief of this team that they have right now. I think it's good that they beat Penn State and Michigan before they play in Ohio State, because you maybe get a little more confidence when you're going up against them. I think they can definitely be competitive. Which, if anything, that's the best thing. If you go, if after Ohio State you're 4-1, I mean, that's good news for you guys. And in terms of the rest of the season, you got to take care of business. I think Maryland's going to be a little bit more challenging opponent than some people may think, especially for Indiana. They get Ohio State this weekend, so that'll be kind of an interesting matchup. Ohio State's definitely going to win probably, but I think it'll be interesting to see sort of how they can play against them, because they just whooped up on Penn State. But in terms of the rest of the season, if you lose to Ohio State, you have one loss. That game against Wisconsin is going to be pretty big. I guess we'll see what Wisconsin looks like down the road. Hopefully they're all cleared to play, with all the COVID issues they have going on right now. But if you only have 2 losses and it's to Ohio State and Wisconsin, that's not too bad. If you only have 1 and you beat Wisconsin, I mean, man, this could be a really exciting year for them. And in terms of sort of bowl projections and where you can end up, I mean, that's another big thing. This could be one of the biggest bowl games they've played in a while, which I think is exciting. But man, I'm looking forward. I'm doing what Indiana football shouldn't do, and I'm looking ahead to that Ohio State game. And in my head, I'm like 4-0 Indiana versus 4-0 Ohio State. Like, that's a really exciting storyline and thing to cover. But they got to take care of business in Michigan State. They lost. I brought it up a few times on the show already. That loss there a year ago. You're going back there. I think that's another thing that helps, is that they remember that loss pretty vividly from last season. And I think, if anything, that'll keep them focused and motivated to go there this year and hopefully pull out a victory.
Walking around Bloomington this weekend, I think Indiana fans already wanted Alabama in the national championship game. I saw a couple signs. I heard a couple chants of "We want Bama." I don't know if Indiana actually wants Bama. ESPN actually gave Indiana a 3.3% chance to make the college football playoff, which absolutely astounded me, because that's really not that low odds. But anyways, a couple more questions for you, Dylan. I mean, we haven't had a single negative thing to say today about Indiana football. Even against Penn State, there was a lot of things to improve on. What is one thing that you want to see the team specifically improve on, and they need to improve on, to compete against Ohio State, to beat a Wisconsin, and have that really successful season that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think as good as the offense was against Michigan, there were still a few moments where I thought a lot of things weren't executed right. I think at one point, they were up. I think Michigan had just scored, and sort of, the pressure was on Indiana to maybe do something. And I think they went like 3 and out. And the play calls, you're just kind of like, what are they doing? Are they like, what is that complacent? I mean, what's going on with them? And I think that's sort of an area where you kind of look at, and especially early on in the Penn State game, just sort of, the play calls and what they were able to do early to move the ball just weren't there. And I think we saw it a little bit against Michigan when Michigan was starting to try to turn around and make their comeback. And Indiana was eventually able to put it away. But there were a few drives where you sort of like, I mean, hey, what are they doing? Why did they go away from what was working? And I think that's one of the bigger things is right now I think the defense is playing really well. When I look at from the defense, I mean, yeah, especially what you kind of expected from them. I mean, the way that they've been able to play, I think, has been above kind of expectations. But for the offense, even though they did put up 38 against Michigan, they played a lot better. I still think there's still something left to be desired from that offense that we haven't necessarily seen yet. A little bit more of explosive plays. Getting the run game going, I think, I think it's always going to be something that we're going to say they should be able to do that better. I just don't think. I mean, I think the run game is decent, but it's not great. But I think that's always going to be something that you kind of want to see. But I think the offense altogether is something that I want to see them kind of be explosive and do a little bit more than kind of what we've seen so far this season. So I think that's one of the biggest things for me on the offensive end is sort of to see what they're able to do going forward and how they're able to sort of jump out the hot starts, not get complacent, not go 3 and out a lot of times during games. I think that'll be big for them.
Last question for you, Dylan. We, all had predictions at the beginning of the season. I think they've all been thrown out the window now because of what we've seen the last 3 weeks, and especially last weekend. Again, I mean, no one had Indiana just demolishing Michigan like they did on Saturday. Everyone on College Game Day actually picked Michigan to beat Indiana, including former IU coach Lee Corso, which I know disappointed many IU fans. But now, I just want your prediction. Does Indiana finish in the top 10? Is they're currently number 10 in the AP poll. They've only done that once in program history. And what do you have right now as their final win total at the end of the season?
They were coming in. I thought they were going to be 4-4 in the regular, like the 8-game stretch. I don't know who they're going to get in the 9th game, but that's what I thought coming in, and that's already been blown out the window. Staying in the top 10, I think, is an interesting question. A lot of it obviously sometimes depends on what other teams are able to do. If you lose to Ohio State, if you beat Michigan State and you lose to Ohio State, I mean, maybe if you beat Michigan State, you jump around 8 or 9. And if you lose to Ohio State, does that drop you out of it, depending on what other teams do around you? I mean, it'll be interesting to sort of see if they can stay in the top 10. I think, no question, they're going to stay in the top 25. And I don't know. I mean, that Wisconsin game, I think is going to be really interesting. It's on the road. Purdue looks pretty decent this season. They haven't even played with Rondell Moore yet. They're 2-0. I think Maryland's a little bit of a tougher test than many people might have thought before. But I think they should be able to kind of get through this 8-game stretch at 7-1. I mean, I think that they should be able to do that. We haven't seen enough from Wisconsin for me to know how they might play against them. So that's why I'm going to say 7-1 right now. It could be 6-2, and then whoever you get in the 9th game, you get. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun season, I think, for a lot of people to sort of watch this team and get on board with them. And I'm really curious to see if they stay in the top 10, especially with the Ohio State game. If they lose it, and then if they win out, I mean, I think they should. If they win out after Ohio State, they probably should at some point get back into the top 10. But yeah, again, a lot of this depends on what other teams around the ranking are doing with their seasons. But let's say 7-1, and let's say, yeah, they do stay in the top 10 the rest of the season.
Well, Dylan has high expectations, and everyone in Bloomington has high expectations for Indiana football. It's going to be a really fun rest of the season with Tom Allen and co. Dylan, thanks so much for coming on today. A lot of fun. Appreciate all your insight.
Yeah, thank you. Big fan of the show, man. Keep it up.
I appreciate that. That will do it today for our episode of Unpaid Interns. We'll be back on Wednesday talking more college football. But until then, check out all of our Unpaid Interns episodes on the IU Sports Media YouTube page or wherever you get your podcasts. For Dylan Wallace, I'm Griffin Epstein. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone.